Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, we've been previewing live on air for the past month or so about our upcoming rugby documentary. We're here in the heartland of Munster rugby here as well. So all our listeners, our audience, will be excited to hear this documentary. It's called Global Rugby Legends, My Life in Rugby. So we speak to iconic rugby players from the Northern Hemisphere countries, Ireland, England, Wales, France, Scotland and Italy, and the Southern Hemisphere countries, Australia, South Africa, Argentina and New Zealand. And our guest this evening is an England player. He's played for his country on 26 appearances, 41 points. He played for England between the years of 2008 2011. He scored tries against us. He scored against Ireland. He scored tries against Wales as well. He's played as a fullback. He's played as a wing. He's played as an outside centre. He'll be most notably remembered in club rugby for his try that won Toulon, the 2013 Heineken Cup final against Clermont, in an only try score in a 16-15 point of victory for Toulon. One of the youngest, earliest English players to leave London Irish to go out and try himself in French rugby, the one and only Delon Armitage. And Delon, first of all, an interesting backstory to the Armitage family growing up. A family that grew up in France on the French Riviera, sort of such. And as a 12-year-old, you got to introduce rugby for the first time playing with Nice. And the part of France you grew up with, was soccer ever an option, or football, or what made it rugby? What made the Armitage family going to rugby at such a young age as a 12-year-old? And those early years playing rugby in sort of France, was it different, sort of a culture shock to you when you came back and you to England for the very first time as a teen and played rugby in England?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'll have to move you back a few years before moving to France. I moved from Trinidad in the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago, where I was born with my brothers. Moved over to live with my stepdad. So my stepdad actually played rugby. He played for Hatfield in North London. So he introduced us to rugby, whereas it was football or cricket growing up. So we looked up to Brian Lara Athletics, Atta Bolden, so coming from Trinidad. So we started playing a minis at Richmond Rugby Club. Just before that, we had a little taster for a year at Sudbury. We had a rugby team. So we ended up starting rugby for Richmond in the minis. So that was the first taste of rugby. My stepdad obviously got a job out in south of France in Nice. So we moved out there. Rugby, we loved it, but it wasn't, one of those you watch all the time, saw a future in it. It was having fun with my brothers, obviously in the garden, playing. I guess it was just a way of having a fight without having a fight in the back garden, I guess, for us at the time. Moving to France, it got a little bit more serious. Obviously, the French really loved their rugby. Maybe not so much in the south of France where we were in Nice, where it's more football. You're right. Nice had a very good, strong football team around the area, with Marseille not being far off, Monaco as well. So rugby wasn't the strongest. It was more on the southwest of France. But Nice did have quite a strong team. They were in the French top 14, which was split in two at the time. Really enjoyed going down to Stade Jouret and watching them play. But yeah, we fell in love with rugby watching. I mean, it was a very physical kind of game in France. I don't think you could go through a game without seeing 4 or 5 yellow cards, as the people tell you back in those times in France. But yeah, I think that's where, with my brothers, fell in love with rugby. Went through all the setup going up towards France under 16s.
And obviously, Delon, you mentioned that time in France. So were you looking at Philippe Saint-Andrés, the Sellas, the sort of players like that? Sella obviously was coming to the end of his career. The Bernard Salles, probably young Bernard Salles as well. Were they the sort of inspirations for you, obviously, as a winger? Did you go on the backyard with your brothers and pretend that you were Philippe Saint-André as sort of such?
Yeah, at the time, I think growing up, especially guys like Antamac, those guys coming through, Serge Blanco was massive over in France. But yeah, suddenly was big for me growing up, watching him play for Colombia. So there was, Bernard Saar, these guys, La Maison, they were massive for me growing up. Watching them play, especially that side that Toulouse had back in the day with Castanet and the world class Jan de Leg, those guys. So yeah, they were a massive influence on me. Personally, for me, it was more maybe the likes of Antamac, Serge Blanco. Obviously, they were more of idols to me, leaders. They looked like me, So it was something I could say I would want to be like that guy, and it was the inspiration just watching them play, the way they, handled the ball, they moved it around. The French rugby style back in those days was amazing.
And when you come back to England, then obviously in terms of coming back back to school and start to England, did you start to pick up where you left off with rugby? In terms of, was there a year or two when you weren't playing the game? Did you have to pick in, the rugby become very sort of serious? Obviously, you mentioned there the French under 16s there as well, and having that, you played 3 times for them, but you were sort of rejected as well in terms of sort of France as well. But no, I could be wrong here, but this is what the research is sort of saying as well. Did that sort of give you a sort of chip on your sort of shoulder as well in terms of trying to come back and sort of prove people wrong? Do you feel that you had something to prove? Did it make you even better, that sort of rejection?
Not really. I think, sorry, at the time when I was going through, I think it was a top 100, top 50, and they break it down. You do a training session around Narbonne. A lot of the times it was tough, and other times, you had to be able to swim 50 meters. So I don't know what that had to do with rugby. But anyway, it was like, went through the motions there. I had an offer to go, which with Richmond, who the team I started with minis, to go on tour to Australia, New Zealand and Fiji. And I went over there for 3 to 4 weeks. After I was told, obviously, with the French that wasn't going to happen. So when I went on tour with them, I met up with the old boys I used to play with at a young age in Richmond. And I kind of fell in love with it again. I was told, I would be good enough to play at England school level if I came back to England. And so, yeah, I jumped at that opportunity, flew back to England, lived with family, Edwin Doran, who looked after me really well. Started playing again for Richmond first team, went to Richmond College, fell in love with the game, and in the end ended up playing from a state school, playing for England schools, or doing England schools trials under 18s, which normally you don't do. You go through clubs or schools. You don't do schools unless you're at a private or public school. So I got a bit of taste of that, and again, it was another kind of rejection because I wasn't at a public school. I shouldn't really have been playing for schools, and I didn't make it, and that was probably why. But off the back of that, got a contract in the Academy of London Irish in 2002. So for me, again, what came with, again, bad news, another door opened and ended up in London Irish Academy in 2002.
Dylan, you mentioned an interesting point there, and it's probably something that not mentioned there. And I don't know, mistakenly, I might have interpreted that wrong. When you come back to Richmond, you came back on your own without your family. So your family is over in France. Your younger brother, Stefan, I imagine, is over in France as well. But that's almost like some of those players that come over from Ireland to England who try out for Premier League soccer teams at 15 or 16 for a board and family. Is that a very lonely, did you find that a very lonely experience? How did you start to communicate with your family at the time when there was no technology of Zooms or Skypes or sort of mobile phones or sort of stuff like that? Did you feel you were taking a big sort of risk in terms of pursuing that sort of dream? Did it hearten you? Did it make you more of a man?
It grows you up very quickly. But look, I wanted to be at that time. I think, like I said, when I went on that tour, I came back, I fell in love with the sport again, fell in love with rugby, really wanted to be the best I could be at it. So which meant, if it meant I had to move abroad, it did. And I think in other aspects, it saved me, really, because at that time in my life, 17 coming to 18, I wasn't I didn't really have any ambitions to do anything. I wasn't really doing that well in school, and I was falling off the tracks a little bit. And this rugby lit that up for me again. Gave me a spark, gave me something to look forward to, something to aspire to. And when I came back, and at 17, I was playing for Richmond first team for the men's. I know they were in the lower leagues, but to be able to play with grown men, I was learning a lot from them. And from there, I got a contract into an academy with under 18. So I'd already been playing with grown men. Having to leave France, leave my brothers and family behind, that was tough. But then it gave me something to, to be proud of, to go back to them on the weekend and say, yeah, I did this. I learned to do that. I'm really doing really well here. My training, I'm really enjoying, nutritionist, I'm training hard. I've got weight sessions. And, so we'd have these conversations with my brothers, and, it was almost like they were really proud of me. So that kept my spirits really high. And I didn't really feel alone because, like I said, rugby is like a family to me. And, no matter what club, country where you go, I think you're welcome into that environment, and you're well looked after. And that's how I felt when I joined Irish.
And when you joined London Irish, the sort of such as well, in terms of that rugby career, we also know that London Irish has some prominent Irish players. Jordan Murphy would have played there for Jordan Murphy was Leicester Tigers. There was apologies about that. Just get my names mixed up as well. I know David
Bishop. Justin Bishop would be in there. Justin Bishop.
Justin Bishop. And I know before your time, David Humphreys would have played there as well. Right. In terms of a big sort of influence as well. So did you feel that sort of family sort of connection? You mentioned that Irish sort of bonds as well. Did you feel that you at London Irish at the time that you were, let's say the Leicester team going up against the big guns like the Leicester Tigers, the Wasps, the sort of big names of English Premiership? Did you actually have to relish that underdog challenge with the Irish already had labelled against them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I joined the club, I actually joined the year after they won the Powergen Cup. They beat, I think it was Northampton comfortably in the finals at Twickenham. So I joined the club on a high. But yes, for years, I think for about 10 years that I was there, I think 8 of those years we were fighting the bottom of the table. Probably not relegation, but we were always at the bottom. So at the start of the year, it was, can we finish any higher than 8th or 7th, trying to get into the Heineken Cup, Champions Cup. So yeah, it was a tough few years for me over there, but I learned more. As I sound nice cliche, I learned more from losing than I probably would have with winning. The team evolved, I think, as the years went on. From 2008 onwards, I think we had a really strong team. There were some big signings. Not as much Irish players as we used to have in there, or South Africans. A few more Kiwis, Islanders than normal. But yeah, as professional rugby changed, the team changed. We got stronger, and in 2009 we were in a Premiership final. So yeah, I think that was the highlight of my career. I think with London Irish. But yeah, going to the club, yes, we were always the underdogs. We knew that. We knew every game was a tough game, but we turned over some big teams. We went up to Leicester, and I think we probably had a big draw over there. We went to Harlequins, we nilled them in the semis. So there was a lot of highlights and some bad times waiting for results, whether we were going to get relegated or not, with Bristol won or lost. So there's some highs and some lows, but yeah, over the 10 years was really enjoyable.
I suppose in 2003, you were probably there. You looked on with many rugby supporters when you saw England doing the pinnacle, winning that Rugby World Cup. You saw Martin Johnson lifting that trophy aloft, and roll on 5 years' time then in 2008, November 2008, you get a call from Martin Johnson, the England manager, in terms of making your debut, and a debut that he sort of revelled in. He sort of give you lofty praise for that debut, and you were in his thoughts then for a constant period after that debut, that sort of day. Did you feel that you had to grab that opportunity by both hands, even though you're a youngster at the time? Did there's so much competition in that English sort of backline. There's so many options each sort of week that if I don't make an early impression straight from the off, that hype around me could disappear fairly fast.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the time I got in, I got into England fairly late, so when Martin Johnson came in, and again, I wasn't third, maybe not even fourth choice. There was a lot of injuries coming in. I remember Jason Robinson had just retired. A few guys were in and out. Josh Lucy, who could all fit in at fullback. And when I got the opportunity, the call, I was pretty shocked. But then again, I knew there was no one else at the time. I think in the whole Guinness Premiership, I think I was the last guy standing as a fullback who was still fit. So when I got the call, obviously had that conversation, you're right, with Martin Johnson about it. And, his words to me were, you're only renting the shirt. You've got an opportunity here to make it yours. And, let's see how you get on the weekend. So at the time when he said it, I wasn't sure whether he even wanted me there or even knew who I was, because obviously I was one of the last choices. But, those words stuck in my head, and I think it helped me through that game. It was, this could be first, last, chance of wearing an England shirt. And I wanted to make my family and everyone that works out, and myself, mainly all the hard work I put into getting, this English shirt, because I felt personally for myself, I was a very confident player, that I wanted to play for England for a long time before that, but wasn't sure whether I'd be good enough. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. I worked really hard, and I think it just paid off in the end, because I was ready at the time. No matter what anyone had said, I was ready to play for England. I wanted to be at Twickenham. I wanted to play in that game, and I prepared so well for that mentally that I just felt it was my time, and everything just seemed to slot into place on the day. So, yeah, that's one moment I'll probably never forget.
And I suppose, Dylan, another sort of moment, I speak to you, family means the world to you, and family is so important. And you have a milestone in terms of your family, that you equaled the Underwood brothers in terms of the Underwood in 2009. Since 1995, when Rory Underwood and his brother Tony Underwood played for England, roll on in 2009, it's Delon Armitage and Stephen Armitage on the same sort of England sort of team. That's to have that bit of history, that bit of facts, and to be compared with the legend of the Underwoods, and Rory Underwood, England's probably one of England's top all-time try scorers as well. Was that a special sort of moment for you? And given the Underwoods' sort of heritage as well, coming from Malaysia and Chinese extent as well, and your similarity coming from Trinidad and Tobago as well, did it make it that extra? Do you feel that sort of bond, that sort of close sort of group that you were sort of cast into?
Yeah, I mean, for me, more importantly, it was actually playing against, with my brother at Twickenham, for my family. For him, he was very nervous to see that in the videos and the pictures. But yeah, it was a proud moment, because especially, I mean, I'd already been there, played a few games, but then I knew how hard he'd worked to get there as well, with the ups and downs. Being told he's not tall enough, he's not this. Always, felt like coaches were making excuses about him, because he was really good, in the Premiership for London Irish when he turned up. For years, he's one of those players that, if his name's on the team sheet, you stand a chance of winning. And that went on to Toulon as well. So, for me, it was a proud moment for me, for my parents, my family, everyone, to see us both standing there singing the national anthem at Twickenham in front of a packed crowd, it's a very special moment, one that I think both of us will never forget.
And you mentioned Toulon there, and moving to Toulon and playing for Toulon. Obviously, if you make that sort of journey, as what most players when they play outside their sort of country, it sort of ends their sort of international ambitions. Did you feel, obviously you had unfinished business with French rugby, Toulon was attractive, possibility of winning Heineken Cups. Did you feel maybe going to Toulon that you were probably putting your World Cup ambitions with England on a back burner, that you might have missed out an opportunity of maybe a World Cup or a British Irish Lions appearance for you?
Yes, I mean, at the time, that wasn't really in my head when I signed for Toulon. I was in a negotiation with London Irish at the time. We were really bad at the World Cup 2011 at the time. When Toulon came with the ambition, I spoke to Philippe and Bernard Laporte, and they were talking about winning, the Heineken Cup, winning silverware, winning the top 14. They showed me, the team that they were going to assemble, and it was just a hard thing to say no to. A lot of people would say to me, do you not regret leaving? Because obviously I was in the England squad, but at the time, after that World Cup, I'd just been put in the Saxons team, so I'd been dropped from the 30-man squad. A lot of us after that World Cup, even though it said myself and Tuilangi were the two stand-up from the World Cup, I'd been dropped from that 30-man squad. So now I'm in the Saxons. London Irish are not budging on my negotiations, and Toulon come along and say, well, we'll give you this and you get an opportunity to win silver, which as a player, young player, it's very important, I think, for me. Well, for me anyway, for silverware, I wanted to win something. I wanted to reach the top, and I had an opportunity with a team who wanted to be champions of Europe, who wanted to be champions of France, and it was a hard one to say no to, and ended up going to Toulon.
And Dylan, I'm just going to throw a wild card, and you obviously didn't happen, but if there had been an opportunity and the Lions manager had said, listen, Dylan, if you stay in England, we're going to bring you on a Lions shirt and you're going to have a chance to play for the Lions, would that have maybe swung your mind a bit?
Simple answer, yes. The opportunity to play for the Lions, you would never turn that down. And if it meant fighting relegation for another year just to be involved in that, definitely I would have stayed to play for the Lions.
Yeah. It's a thing for every sort of rugby player. That's the opportunity. It's a unique sort of an occasion. You went to Toulon, obviously won the Heineken Cup, scored the winning try against Clermont in that sort of final as well. And did you feel maybe at 2013 coming back, proving your name on the French stage with all those big sort of international names as well, that some way it was sort of redemption for those earlier sort of years in sort of France?
Not really for me. I always wanted to play. I know it sounds too weird. It is Toulon, but I always wanted to play for the Barbarians. And I think Toulon is not far off that, is it? If you look at the squad that we had from all different cultures, nations, from South Africa, New Zealand, from England, Australia. So to play for Toulon for me was being able to play for the Barbarians, which I never had the chance to do. So and to do that for 4 years, and I mean in those 4 years, I think we reached 6 finals. So I mean, for any player, if you told me I'd be in 6 finals in 4 years, regardless if I was going to win them or not, I'd probably bite your hand off, I think. And those experiences I've had, being able to play at Stade de France in front of 67,000, then coming to Twickenham to be able to play in front of 89,000, going to Dublin on that day at De Viva, that day, that first Heineken Cup finals, I think I was more nervous then than playing for England. And to come away with silverware, even though Clermont dominated us for 75 minutes, I think it's one of the highlights of my career.
And Dylan, we're sort of nearly coming in to the end of our time with you now. Just an ultimate question. It is an Irish radio documentary, so we have to throw an Irish sort of question in there for you. You that came across Ireland against many times, and obviously people always mention O'Driscoll, they mention O'Gara, they mention maybe Carney. Well, for you playing in your position as a fullback, centre back, what sort of Irish player did you like coming up and testing your wits against when you played against Ireland?
I mean, there's only one for me. From fullback is Jordan Murphy. He's the most skillful fullback I've ever had the opportunity to play against. Just the way he, just elegant, wasn't he? The way he was with the ball. He made things look so simple. The way he caught the ball always looked like he had time on his hand. And I've been really lucky. I mean, Tommy Bowe as well, up against him on the wing. Trimble, those guys, when you used to go up there to Ulster in the freezing cold on a Friday night, they made catching the ball in rain and cold look so simple. So I mean, as a back three, those guys were amazing. So yeah, but definitely for me, if someone said to me, who would you want to play like, even look like, because he's a handsome fellow, Jordan Murphy is definitely one of the top fullbacks for me.
And Delon Armitage, finally looking back, if you saw a young Delon Armitage in his pomp back in 2009, back in 2010, how would you describe him as a rugby player? What was his attributes and what made him the man he is today?
Attributes wise, I mean, I was very hardworking. I was, I took pride in what I did. I was very confident player, because I did my homework before going out on the field. You know, a lot of people see that as arrogant, but there's to them. But I saw it as confidence because I worked on my skills. I believed in myself. But yeah, I was just a young guy just trying to enjoy rugby, playing with a smile on my face and, enjoying the experience, because I was always told it doesn't last long. I think for myself, I've got no regrets in the game. I think I pushed to the limit, sometimes maybe too far, but really enjoyed every moment of it, the friendship I've made out of it. I'm really grateful for the sport.
On that note, Delon Armitage, thanks for joining us today to share a unique, fascinating story from Trinidad and Tobago to England, to France, back again to England as well, and obviously finishing his club career in France as well. Played for England on numerous occasions, 26 appearances between 2008 2011, 44 points, a prominent career with London Irish, winning the Heineken Cup with Toulon as well. A detrimental thorn in Ireland's against Ireland so many times, scoring against us, against Wales. Delon Armitage, thanks for sharing your story with us today in this episode of Global Rugby Legends, My Life in Rugby. Take care.
Thank you, James.